3 days before my Mediterranean cruise, my son looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, the booking has been canceled." I said nothing, even though that voyage was the final promise I had made to my late wife. The next morning, my daughter-in-law's mother called, her voice dripping with triumph. "Thank you for giving me your balcony cabin," she said. I simply replied, "Have a wonderful trip." But only minutes after they proudly stepped aboard the ship, I glanced at my phone. 83 missed calls were staring back at me. "Before we begin, thank you for being here. It genuinely means more than you know." Drop a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Your city, your country. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And a quick note, this story includes fictional elements woven in for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or places is purely coincidental, but the lesson inside it is one worth keeping. The fog rolls in off the Pacific every morning at Carmel by the Sea, and for 3 years running, it had been the first thing I registered when consciousness found me again, not the alarm, not the light, but that particular chill that settles into old houses and older bones before the sun gets around to doing anything useful about it. My name is Warren Caldwell, 65 years old, retired logistics manager, 30 years moving freight across 4 continents. 3 decades of making sure things arrived where they were supposed to, when they were supposed to, in the condition they were promised. I was good at it. I am still good at it, even when the shipment in question is my own life. I live at 4 Sycamore Lane, Carmel by the Sea, California, in a house that Dot picked out 22 years ago because she said the kitchen window faced exactly the right direction for morning coffee. She was not wrong about that, or about most things. Dot. Dorothea Marie Caldwell. My wife of 28 years, gone since January of 2022. 17 months of fighting a diagnosis the doctors had given her 2 years to outlast. She came within 3 months of proving them wrong, which was exactly the kind of stubbornness that made her both infuriating and extraordinary. She was 62 years old. She laughed too loud at her own jokes, cried at television commercials, and once spent an entire Saturday afternoon rearranging the bookshelves by emotional weight rather than genre or author. The system made complete sense once she explained it. I still have not moved those books. By March of 2022, I had built myself something that functioned like a routine. Coffee at 6:15 from the same drip machine she had called aggressively over-engineered and used every morning without complaint. The newspaper at the kitchen table. Chester, our gray tabby, winding between my ankles with the focused intensity of an animal who has decided that proximity to a human is acceptable as long as no one makes a fuss about it. On Saturday mornings, Bud Kowalski came by. He is 70 years old, a retired pharmacist, my neighbor at number 6 since before Dot and I arrived on Sycamore Lane. He showed up at my door 3 days after the funeral with a pot of soup and a chess set and the words, "You don't have to talk, we can just play." We played for 2 hours that afternoon. I have not had to ask him to come back since. That particular Saturday in March, he arrived at 7:32, set up the board, poured himself a coffee without asking. He has never needed to ask, and dropped into the chair across from me. "You look like you slept," he said. From Bud, that was practically a standing ovation. "Eleanor called last night," I told him. He nodded, moving a pawn. Eleanor Finch had been Dot's closest friend for nearly 40 years, a retired English teacher, sharp at 71, who had relocated from Portland to Carmel when Dot's diagnosis made distances feel unconscionable. She still called me every few weeks, not out of obligation, but out of the kind of genuine care that does not expire when the person who created it does. She wanted to know if I had looked at the notebook lately, I said. Bud's hand paused over the board. He knew about the notebook. After he left, I went to my study. It was in the bottom right drawer of the desk underneath a folder of property tax records, I had not opened since 2019. Small, cloth-covered dark navy blue softened at the corners from years of being carried in Dot's bag. On the front, in her looping, left-leaning cursive, one word, written with a finality that made it feel more like a promise than a label. Someday. I had found it 3 weeks after the funeral, read it straight through, sitting on the edge of our bed, and then put it in the drawer and left it there for over a year. I was not ready for what it made me feel. I was ready now, or close enough. I opened it. The blue notebook was not a journal. Dot kept a separate journal that I had made a deliberate and permanent decision not to read, a boundary she would have respected, so I respected it for her. This was something else. A list of places organized not by continent or cost or season, but by feeling. Santorini appeared on page 4. Beside it in her handwriting, white walls, blue domes, wine I cannot pronounce. Warren will complain about the stairs and love every single minute of it. Non-negotiable. My throat tightened so fast it surprised me. Dubrovnik, page 9. Circled twice in red pen, real. Go before it becomes a theme park. Amalfi, page 11. The kind of coastline that makes you understand why people write poetry. Bring Warren. Make him look at it. I sat with the notebook for a long time. Outside, the fog had begun its slow retreat, leaving behind a sky so clear and so blue it seemed almost aggressive in its cheerfulness. I closed the notebook, set it on the desk, placed my palm flat on the cover and held it there. Then I opened the laptop and typed Mediterranean cruises, Barcelona departure, 14 nights. Dot. I said quietly, to the empty room, to the books she had arranged by emotional weight, to the cat sitting in the doorway, judging me with the calm authority of a creature who has never once doubted itself. I think it's time. 16 months is a long time to plan a trip, and not nearly long enough to plan the right one. I spent the first 4 of those months reading. Cruise line reviews, port guides, shore excursion breakdowns, travel forums where retired Americans argued about embarkation ports with the conviction usually reserved for politics and college football. I read all of it. I took notes in a legal pad the way I used to take notes during vendor negotiations, margin comments, question marks, items circled for follow-up. By June of 2023, I knew exactly what I wanted. Nolan Reeves. Travel sat on Ocean Avenue between a wine shop and a gallery that sold overpriced driftwood sculptures. The kind of small, independent agency that had survived the internet by being genuinely better at the specific thing it did. Nolan himself was 45 trim, with the unhurried manner of someone who had learned that anxious clients needed calm more than speed. He had been in the business for 18 years. Dot had found him first. She had called him 2 years before her diagnosis about a trip to New Zealand we never got around to taking. Mr. Caldwell. He stood and extended a hand. It's good to see you again. I was sorry to hear about Dot. Thank you, I said. I had gotten better at accepting condolences without my voice doing anything embarrassing. Most of the time. I told him what I needed. 14 nights. Mediterranean. Barcelona departure. The ports Dot had marked in her notebook, Santorini, Dubrovnik, the Amalfi Coast, Kotor. I slid a handwritten list across the desk. He looked at it carefully, the way a good professional looks at something a client has clearly spent serious time on. Silver Whisper, he said, pulling up his screen. Silver Seas boutique line. 312 passengers maximum. They cover all of these ports. He turned the monitor toward me. There's a balcony cabin available starboard side mid-deck. The view coming into Santorini from that side is... He paused. Transformative. The total came to $8,950. I had been saving with that number in mind, so it did not surprise me. I put down a deposit $3,800 to hold the cabin while I confirmed private guide arrangements for 2 ports. Nolan explained that the booking would remain fully in my name until any changes were formally requested with verified identification. His system required two-factor phone verification. For every modification, a security measure added after a client's booking had been altered without their knowledge 3 years earlier. "Nobody touches your reservation without going through you first," he said. I signed the deposit agreement, wrote the check, and shook his hand. On the drive home, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but the specific sensation of moving towards something rather than simply through time. The cabin existed. The ports were real. The view coming into Santorini was transformative. Dot would have made fun of me for taking 16 months to book a vacation. I was smiling at that thought when I pulled into the driveway and found Preston's car parked at the curb. He was standing on his front porch with 2 bags of groceries. Nadine had sent him to check on me. He looked relieved when he saw me the way people look when they have been quietly worried and are glad to be proven wrong. We ate lunch. We talked. At some point while I was in the kitchen cutting bread, Preston walked down the hallway, not toward the bathroom, but toward the study where the laptop was still open on the booking confirmation screen. I did not notice his phone in his hand when he came back. I did not think about it until much later. I was not in the room when it happened. I want to be clear about that from the start, because what I am about to describe did not come from my own memory. It came from 3 separate sources, what Preston eventually told me himself at this kitchen table with his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his coffee mug, what June Kowalski uncovered during her investigation months later, and one email that Simone had sent to a lawyer in San Jose and apparently forgotten existed on a recoverable server. I have assembled those pieces into something coherent. I believe it is accurate. I believe it because the pieces fit together the way pieces fit together when they are true. The meeting happened on a Wednesday evening in late July at the house Preston and Nadine shared on Ridgecrest Drive in San Jose, a house that was larger than they needed and decorated with the careful, expensive neutrality of people who wanted guests to notice the furniture without being able to criticize it. Nadine Caldwell, my daughter-in-law, 35 years old, a woman who worked in corporate marketing and approached most problems in her life the way she approached a campaign brief, which is to say with absolute clarity about the desired outcome and flexible ethics about the path to get there, had called the meeting. That is the word Preston used when he told me about it later. Called the meeting. As though it had been a quarterly review. Loretta Marsh was already there when Preston got home from work. Loretta was Nadine's mother, 63 years old, twice divorced, and possessed of the particular social confidence that develops in people who have spent decades operating under the belief that their presence is a gift to any room they enter. She had sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, and she wore her disappointments like accessories, always visible, always coordinated with whatever grievance she was currently nursing. She had wanted to take a Mediterranean cruise for years. She told Preston that evening, her voice carrying the wounded tone of someone describing a basic human right that had been unfairly withheld. Preston said he stood in his own living room doorway, with his laptop bag still on his shoulder, and watched his mother-in-law gesture at a printed copy of the booking confirmation he had photographed at my house, and felt the particular cold sensation of a man who realizes he has handed someone a weapon without understanding what it was. She's right, Preston. Nadine crossed her arms, her voice smooth and certain. Your father has more than enough. He won't even notice if the booking transfers. He's not exactly running around making the most of things. Preston's jaw tightened at that. To his credit, and I say that as a man who found it difficult to locate credit for Preston in those months he pushed back. His voice came out harder than he expected. That trip is for Mom, he said. He planned it for Mom. Nadine's expression shifted the way expressions shift when someone has decided that an argument has already been won and is simply waiting for the other person to understand that. Your mother is gone, Preston, she said quietly. And your father is alone in that house, not sleeping, not eating properly, not doing anything. What is a cruise going to do for him at 65 by himself, whereas my mother, Your mother can book her own cruise, Preston said. The room went tight after that. Preston told me his heart was hammering, that he could hear it in his ears, that Loretta was watching him the way she always watched him, when he disagreed with Nadine with the patient expression of a woman who has learned that all she has to do is wait. That was when the knock came at the door. Simone, my daughter, 34 years old, the younger of my two children, who had driven up from her apartment in Palo Alto at Nadine's invitation without telling me she was coming to San Jose that weekend. She walked in with a bottle of sparkling water and a canvas tote and the composed, unreadable expression she had been perfecting since she was approximately 14 years old. She set the sparkling water on the kitchen counter, pulled out a chair, and sat down. "I heard what you were arguing about," she said, looking at Preston. Her voice was quiet, and even the voice of someone who had thought about this before arriving. "I don't think it has to be an argument." Preston stared at her. "Simone, that's Dad's trip. For Mom. I know what it's for." She looked at the booking confirmation on the table. Her eyes moved across it with a focused, methodical attention that I recognized it was the same way she read contracts at the technology licensing firm where she worked, looking for the mechanism, finding the entry point. "The booking is in Dad's account. He put down a deposit. He hasn't paid in full." She paused. "Does anyone know what email address is linked to the account?" The room went quiet in a different way. Loretta leaned forward in her chair. Her eyes had brightened with the specific energy of a person who senses that the conversation has just become useful. "If the contact email gets changed before the agency sends the final payment reminder," Simone continued, her voice matter-of-fact, "then the notification goes somewhere else. Dad doesn't see it. The reminder goes to whoever the email belongs to now. From there—" She stopped. Let the sentence end where it was. Preston told me he felt the room tilt slightly. His palms were damp. He looked at his sister across the table and tried to find something in her face that told him she was about to say she was joking. She was not joking. "Simone," he said. His voice came out thin. We can't just—" "I'm not saying anything," Simone said pleasantly, reaching for her sparkling water. "I'm just explaining how accounts work. What anyone does with that information is their own decision." Loretta was already nodding. Nadine picked up her phone. Preston said he wanted to stand up and leave. He said his legs did not cooperate. He sat at the table while his wife found the agency's website on her phone, and his sister looked out the window at the San Jose evening with the serene, slightly distant expression of a person who has already calculated 3 moves ahead and found them satisfactory. Later that night, Loretta called the travel agency. She identified herself as Warren Caldwell's personal assistant, her voice warm and efficient, and entirely convincing to anyone who did not know her, and asked to make a small update to the contact information on the account. Nolan's system required a verification code sent to the phone number on file. My phone number. The code never came to Loretta. She told Nadine it had not worked. She said it with irritation, the irritation of someone unaccustomed to systems that do not yield to confidence alone. Simone, according to Preston, simply looked up from her phone and said, "I have another way in." She did not explain what she meant. She just smiled a small private smile directed at her screen and set the sparkling water bottle down on the table with a soft, deliberate click. The call came on a Saturday morning in early August, and I remember the exact quality of the light through the kitchen window. When it happened, that particular pale gold that Carmel gets in the hour before the marine layer fully burns off, the kind that makes everything look softer than it actually is. I was on my second cup of coffee. Chester had claimed the chair across from me the way he always did when he wanted company, but refused to admit it, sitting upright with the dignified posture of an animal who considers himself a guest rather than a pet. I had the shore excursion notes spread across the table, private guide options for Dubrovnik. The timing on the Santorini Caldera walk that Dot had marked with 2 asterisks, and the note, "Do not rush this one." "Warren, I mean it. My phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number, California area code. I picked up. Tyler. The voice was warm, bright, carefully assembled. It's Loretta Marsh. I just wanted to call personally and say thank you. What you're doing is incredibly generous, and I want you to know that Faith and I are absolutely thrilled about. I set my coffee cup down. Not because I was angry. Not yet. Because something in my chest had gone very still, the way it goes still when a manifest number does not match the cargo, and you need every functioning brain cell pointed at the problem before you say a single word. She had called me Tyler. My name is Warren. It has always been Warren. Loretta Marsh had met me 11 times over the past 3 years, at Preston and Nadine's wedding, at 2 Thanksgivings, at a birthday dinner in San Jose, where she had spent 40 minutes explaining to me why her preferred method of investing was superior to my pension. She knew my name. The wrong name told me the whole story in under 2 seconds. She was reading from something, a script or notes or a story someone had constructed for her, and whoever had constructed it had made one small, fatal error. I pressed 2 fingers against the side of my jaw and breathed in through my nose. Dot had taught me this, not the breathing specifically, but the principle behind it. 4 counts before you respond to news you don't like. 4 counts because the first response that comes to mind is almost never the right one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Loretta, I said. My voice came out level, professionally level. The voice I used in vendor negotiations when someone tried to change contract terms on the morning of signing. I'm sorry, what exactly did I give you? A pause. Shorter than I would have expected from someone caught off guard. She recovered quickly, I will give her that. Well, the cabin, of course. The booking. Amber explained the whole situation, that you had decided the trip was a bit much right now, and that you wanted the reservation to go to family who could really use it. Another warm smile I could hear through the phone. It really is so thoughtful, Tyler. Faith is already looking at what to pack. The name again, Tyler. I looked down at the shore excursion notes on the table, at Dot's handwriting in the margin of the page I had photocopied from her notebook. Do not rush this one, Warren. My jaw tightened so hard I felt it in my back teeth. My right hand flat on the table, pressed down against the wood until the knuckles went pale. Not because I was losing control, because I was very deliberately keeping it. I see, I said. 2 words. That was all. We are just so grateful. Loretta continued, her voice loosening now with the confidence of a person who believes the hard part is over. I was a little worried there might be some confusion, but Amber said you were completely on board, so... Loretta. I said her name the way I used to say the name of a vendor who had just told me a delivery would be 3 weeks late. Calm, clear, final. I'm going to have to call you back. I ended the call before she could respond. For a moment, I sat completely still at the kitchen table. Chester, perhaps sensing something had shifted in the atmosphere of the room, stepped down from his chair and walked across the table and headbutted my forearm with surprising force for a 12-pound animal. I know, I told him. I picked up the phone and called Nolan Reeves. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the weekend quality in his voice, relaxed, Saturday morning, unhurried until I spoke. Nolan, it's Warren Caldwell. Has anyone contacted you about my Silver Whisper booking in the past few weeks? Any requests to change the contact information, the name on the reservation? Anything at all? A beat of silence. Then the sound of a chair moving as though he had straightened up. Mr. Caldwell. His voice had shifted into the careful register of a professional who has just understood that a conversation has become serious. We did receive a call, a woman identifying herself as your personal assistant. She asked to update the contact email on the account. Our system sent a verification code to your phone number on file, which is standard procedure for any account modification, and she was not able to provide it. So the change was not processed. A pause. I should have called you immediately. I apologize for that. The booking is still fully in my name, I said. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed, he confirmed. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. My hand still pressed flat on the table finally relaxed. Good, I said. Nolan, I need you to do two things. First, do not accept any modification requests on that account from any person other than me, confirmed by my phone number in person or by verified callback. No exceptions. Understood. And the second thing, I looked out the kitchen window, at the pale gold morning light, at the lemon tree in the garden that Dot had planted the year we moved in, and that still produced more lemons than any two people could reasonably use. Find me something better, I said. On a different ship, same dates. And Nolan, I paused. Let the words sit for a moment. Much better. There is a principle in logistics that sounds simple until you have watched enough shipments go wrong to understand what it actually means. When a route gets compromised, when the original path is no longer viable for whatever reason, you do not stand at the point of failure and argue with it. You reroute. You find a better path. You move the freight. I drove to Ocean Avenue on Monday morning at 8:15. The fog had already burned off. Parking was easy. Nolan was at his desk before I got through the door, which told me he had been expecting me. Mr. Caldwell. He stood. There was something careful in his posture, the look of a man who has spent the weekend thinking about a phone call and what it might mean. Sit down, Nolan, I said. This won't take long. I told him what I needed in 4 sentences. Cancel the existing reservation on the MS Adriana. Release the cabin back to general inventory immediately. Apply the deposit credit to a new booking. And find me the best available cabin on a different ship, same departure window, same ports where possible. Nolan's fingers moved across his keyboard. I watched his face while he searched the small furrow between his brows, the slight compression of his mouth that meant he was reading something carefully. Silver Whisper, he said finally. Silver Sea Boutique Line. 300 passengers, much smaller than the Adriana. Same Barcelona departure date. He turned the monitor toward me. They have 1 sky suite available. Top deck portside. Private butler. Floor-to-ceiling windows, wraparound balcony. He paused. Mr. Caldwell, the view from that balcony coming into Santorini is... How much? I said. He told me. $14,200. Nearly $6,000 more than the original booking, even accounting for the deposit credit being applied. I looked at the number on the screen for approximately 3 seconds. Book it, I said. Nolan blinked. Just once. You're certain, Nolan? I looked at him steadily. My wife spent 20 years collecting photographs of Santorini on her laptop. She never got there. I am going to get there, and I am going to stand on that balcony, and I am going to do it properly. Book it. His hands went back to the keyboard. I heard him exhale, not dramatically, just the quiet release of a man who has just been reminded why he got into this business in the first place. I wrote the check at his desk, the same desk where 2 months earlier I had written a different check with a lighter feeling in my chest. This check was larger. The feeling was different, heavier, more deliberate, the weight of something that matters being treated the way it should be treated. The original reservation, I said, capping my pen. The Adriana cabin. When you release it back to inventory, how quickly does it become available to other buyers? Immediately, Nolan said. The moment I process the cancellation, it goes back into the general pool. Peak season, that cabin will be gone within hours. Good, I said. I stood and picked up my jacket. Thank you, Nolan. Mr. Caldwell. He hesitated at his desk, one hand resting on the mouse. I hope... He stopped, started again. I hope it's everything she had in mind. My throat tightened for just a moment. I nodded once and walked out into the Carmel morning. Before my face did anything, I would have to explain. I drove from Ocean Avenue to Sycamore Lane, but I did not stop at number 4. I pulled into the driveway of number 6. Bud answered the door in his weekend clothes, old khakis, a flannel shirt that had been washed so many times it had achieved a kind of philosophical softness. He took one look at my face and stepped back from the door. "Coffee's on," he said. We sat at his kitchen table, which is smaller than mine, and covered in the comfortable clutter of a man whose wife keeps the living room tidy and has surrendered the kitchen as a negotiated territory. Bud had held a spare key to my house for 11 years, since the winter Dot locked herself out during a rainstorm, and he was the one who drove over in his pharmacy coat to let her back in. She had never asked for the key back. Neither had I. I told him what had happened, not all of it, not yet, just the essential architecture. The booking, the phone call from Loretta, the cancellation, the new ship. Bud listened the way he always listened, without interrupting, without the sympathetic noises that people make when they are thinking about what they are going to say next instead of actually hearing you. When I finished, he wrapped both hands around his coffee mug and looked at me across the table. "What do you need from me?" he said. That was Bud. 4 words, no performance. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out a sealed envelope. Inside was a copy of the new booking confirmation, the original deposit agreement, the log of Loretta's call to the agency, and the written note Nolan had made of the failed verification attempt on my account. "Keep this somewhere that isn't your house," I said. "Or somewhere in your house that isn't obvious." Bud took the envelope. He did not ask why. He did not ask what I was planning. He simply stood up, walked to the cabinet above his refrigerator, the one that required a step stool to reach and contained, as far as I knew, nothing but expired coupons and a fondue set from 1987, and put the envelope behind the fondue set. He came back to the table and sat down. "June mentioned she has some availability this week," he said, in the casual tone of a man mentioning the weather. June Kowalski was Bud's daughter, 42 years old, a licensed attorney practicing civil and criminal law out of an office on Alvarado Street in Monterey, 12 miles down the coast. She was sharp, efficient, and constitutionally incapable of letting an injustice go unaddressed, which Bud attributed to her mother's side of the family, and which I suspected came equally from him. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. I was in my car backing out of Bud's driveway when my phone rang through the speakers. "Preston." I accepted the call. "Hey, Dad." His voice was careful in the particular way that voices get careful when the person speaking is trying to sound normal and is not entirely succeeding. "Just checking in. How's everything?" I looked at the street ahead of me, at the familiar curve of Sycamore Lane, the cypress trees, the pale sky over the rooftops. "Everything's fine, son," I said. My voice was warm, easy, completely honest in its way. "You have a good week." I ended the call, and for the first time in 3 days, I smiled. Not a large smile, not a triumphant one. Just the quiet, private smile of a man who has rerouted the shipment and knows with 30 years of professional certainty that it is now going exactly where it is supposed to go. The terminal at San Francisco International Airport smells the way all airports smell: recycled air, burnt coffee, and the particular anxiety of people who are either running towards something or away from it. I had always said that to Dot whenever we traveled together. She used to laugh and say I made everything sound like a shipping manifest. That morning, September 19th, 2023, I was running towards something. I arrived at SFO at 5:45 with one rolling suitcase, a carry-on, and Dot's navy notebook tucked into the front pocket of my jacket, where I could feel it against my ribs. Not because I planned to write anything, because leaving it at home felt wrong. The check-in line moved quickly. The agent, a young woman named Greta, asked my destination without looking up from the screen. "Barcelona," I said, "and then a ship." She glanced up. First time doing it alone," I said. She stamped my boarding pass without another word, but she smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not need an explanation. I bought a black coffee near Gate 42 and sat facing the windows. The tarmac outside was still dark, lit only by the slow, deliberate movements of ground vehicles crossing the concrete. I watched them and thought about logistics, the way everything has a sequence, a point of origin, and a final destination. Dot used to say not everything was a supply chain. I always disagreed. Most things are if you look carefully enough. At 6:15, my phone buzzed. Preston. Safe travels, Dad. Call us when you land. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on my knee and finished my coffee. The flight to Barcelona with a connection in New York took just over 13 hours. I had a window seat, which I had specifically requested. Dot always preferred the window. She said the clouds from above looked like a second world that most people never bothered to look for. I had never paid attention to clouds before she said that. Now I could not stop. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I slept for 4 hours. When I woke, the sky was pale gray, and the seat beside me was empty. I opened the notebook to the page where Dot had written Barcelona. Start here, because every good story needs a beginning. She had underlined the word beginning twice. I closed the notebook and did not open it again until we landed. Barcelona in the early morning is a city that has not yet decided what it wants to be. The light comes in low and golden, turning the stone buildings and the faces outside the terminal into something that looks slightly unreal on the edge of a dream, and daylight at the same time. My cab driver was a compact man named Rafael, who spoke fast, cheerful Spanish, and did not mind that I understood almost none of it. By the time we pulled up near Terminal D of the port of Barcelona, I had decided I liked this city. Then I saw the ships. 2 of them were docked along the southern pier, separated by 200 yards of concrete and steel bollards. The first was the MS Adriana, large, white-hulled, built to carry volume rather than experience. Boarding lines were already forming along her lower gangway. The second ship sat farther along the pier, partially obscured by dock cranes. Smaller, darker at the hull, with a deep blue waterline stripe and a single clean funnel against the morning sky. Silver Whisper. I had studied her photograph on Nolan's screen back in June. In person, she was quieter than I expected, more deliberate, like something that already knew where it was going. I paid Rafael, collected my bags, and stood for a moment on the dock. That was when I saw them. Preston was 60 yards away near the Adriana's boarding queue. Light blue polo shirt, large suitcase. Nadine stood beside him in a white sundress, already holding a champagne flute from the cruise line's welcome table on the pier. Loretta Marsh stood slightly ahead of both of them, silver-haired, wearing a coral blazer entirely unsuited to a working port, pointing at the ship with the confident authority of a woman who believed she had arranged everything. In a way, I supposed she had. They were laughing. All 3 of them. Loretta said something, and Nadine tilted her head back, and Preston clapped once quickly, the way he did when he thought something was funnier than it was. I stood very still, close enough that if Preston had turned 30 degrees to his left, he would have seen me. I did not call out. I did not wave. I watched them for exactly 43 seconds. I counted the way I had always counted things, out of habit and precision. And then I turned very calmly and walked in the opposite direction toward the Silver Whisper's private boarding terminal, where a uniformed attendant in a white jacket was already holding a small placard that read, in clean black letters, Caldwell W. Sky Suite 712. The morning light fell across the water between the 2 ships. It was, I noted, exactly the color Dot had described in the notebook. I had a feeling she would have approved. The private check-in terminal for Silver Whisper was a narrow building set back from the main pier, with a glass front that faced the water and a row of potted olive trees running along the entrance path. It was the kind of detail that said everything about the difference between the 2 ships without needing to say anything at all. One ship had a welcome table with complimentary champagne on the open concrete dock. The other had olive trees and shade. Inside, the air conditioning was quiet and precise. A woman at the front desk, Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back a small silver name tag that read, Claudine. Looked up when I walked in and smiled the way that people smile when they have been expecting you. Mr. Caldwell, she said. It was not a question. That's me, I said. She processed my passport and boarding documents in under 3 minutes. She explained the itinerary confirmed my suite number, 712 upper deck portside, and handed me a small cream-colored card with the Silver Whisper emblem embossed at the top. She told me that my personal butler would meet me on the deck outside my suite. I thanked her and walked up the covered gangway. The Silver Whisper held only 312 guests. I had read that number several times during my research, and I had understood it intellectually, the way you understand a figure on a spreadsheet. But walking onto the main deck for the first time, I understood it differently. The corridors were wide and unhurried. There were fresh flowers in a narrow vase on a side table near the elevator. A crew member passing in the opposite direction made eye contact and said good morning, as if she meant it. I found Suite 712 at the end of a carpeted hallway on the upper deck. The door was already propped open. Standing just inside was a man of about 50, broad-shouldered in a white jacket with a small gold insignia on the left breast pocket. He had close-cropped salt and pepper hair and the particular kind of posture that comes not from military training, but from 25 years of genuinely caring about his work. He extended his hand when he saw me approach. Mr. Caldwell, Marcus Webb, I'll be your butler for the duration of the voyage. His handshake was firm and brief. Welcome aboard. I looked past him into the suite. Floor-to-ceiling glass doors opened onto a private balcony facing the harbor. A sitting area with 2 chairs angled toward the view. A king bed with a turned-down corner and a single white pillow that had been placed in the exact center for reasons I could not explain but appreciated. The marble bathroom was visible through a half-open door. There was a bottle of still water on the bedside table with a handwritten card beside it. I did not read the card right away. Marcus, I said my late wife had a list of places she wanted to see. Santorini was first on that list. He did not say he was sorry. He simply nodded once the way a man nods when he understands the full weight of a sentence and does not try to reduce it. We reached Santorini on day 8, he said. I will make sure the balcony is set the way you want it that morning. I set my carry-on down beside the door. That would mean a great deal. I stood on the balcony for a long time after Marcus left. The harbor below was busy. Supply trucks, luggage carts, dock workers moving with the efficient disregard of people who have seen too many departures to find them interesting. The MS Adriana was still visible farther down the pier, her white hull bright in the morning sun. Her boarding queue had shortened. The gangway was nearly clear. I was still looking at the water when my phone rang. The screen read Preston. I let it ring. Once. Twice. A third time. On the 4th ring, I picked the phone up off the balcony railing, looked at the name, and set it back down face up in the chair beside me. The call went to voicemail. 40 seconds later, a text arrived. Dad, there's been a mistake with the cabin. Call me, it's important. I read the message. Then I set the phone down again. I had worked in logistics for 31 years. I had managed supply chains that moved millions of dollars in goods across 12 time zones. In that work, there was a principle that every experienced manager understood, though few put it into words. The moment you reroute a shipment, there will always be someone at the original destination who did not get what they expected. That call, the call from the confused receiver asking where their package was simply part of the process. You documented it. You stayed calm. You did not reroute the reroute. I poured a glass of water from the bottle Marcus had left. Through the glass balcony door, I could see the card on the bedside table. I walked back inside and picked it up. It was handwritten in ink in a precise, careful cursive that belonged to someone who had practiced the gesture many times. Mr. Caldwell, we are honored to have you aboard Silver Whisper. Should anything be needed at any hour, Marcus is available. We hope this voyage gives you exactly what you came for. Captain R. Hargreaves. I folded the card carefully and placed it inside Dot's Navy notebook, between the page that said Santorini and the page that said Dubrovnik. My phone buzzed again on the balcony chair. This time, it was not Preston. It was Simone. I answered Simone's call on the second ring, not because I was eager, but because a man who does not answer his daughter's call on the day he boards a cruise ship raises questions. And I was not yet ready to raise questions, not out loud, not where anyone could hear them. Dad. Her voice was warm the way a room is warm when someone has turned the heat up too fast. You notice it before you understand it. Are you okay? Preston said there was some confusion about the cabin situation. I looked out at the harbor. A supply truck was pulling away from the base of the MS Adriana's pier. The ship's lower gangway was being retracted. I'm fine, Simone, I said. I'm settled in. A half-second pause, brief enough that most people would not have caught it. I caught it. Settled in where? She asked. Preston said the booking got mixed up somehow. He's been trying to reach you. I know, I said. I saw his messages. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad, where are you staying? Which ship? I turned away from the window and sat down in the chair beside the balcony door. Chester was at home with Bud's wife looking after him. I thought about that for a moment, the cat, the house on Sycamore Lane, the envelope behind the fondue set, and felt unexpectedly very calm. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I said. Don't worry about me. I'm not worried, Simone said quickly. Too quickly. I just want to make sure you're comfortable. You know how Preston gets when things don't go according to plan. I do know how Preston gets, I said. How are you, sweetheart? How's work? She answered. She told me about a project at her firm, a deadline, a colleague who was making things difficult. I listened. I made the appropriate sounds at the appropriate moments. By the time the call ended, 8 minutes and 40 seconds, which I noted out of habit, I had told her nothing useful, and she had told me more than she intended. She had not once asked where I was going, only where I was. There is a difference, a significant one. The Silver Whisper pulled away from the dock at 12:47 in the afternoon. I stood on the balcony of Suite 712 and watched Barcelona recede, the cranes first, then the cathedral spires, then the pale smear of the coastline until there was nothing left but the blue of the Mediterranean and the white line of our wake cutting back toward a city that no longer needed anything from me. I went inside. I hung the small laminated card on the outside door handle. It was cream-colored like everything else on this ship, and it read in simple black letters, "Do not disturb." Then I sat down, opened Dot's notebook to a blank page near the back, and wrote Day 1. We left Barcelona at 12:47 p.m. The water is the color you said it would be. Marcus knocked at 6 o'clock precisely and left a tray outside the door without being asked, a covered dish of grilled sea bass, a small bowl of olives, a glass of Albarino, and a folded note that read, Marseille, tomorrow 7. I will have coffee ready at 6. M.W. I ate on the balcony. The sun went down slowly the way it does over open water, pulling the light out in long, flat ribbons of orange and gold until there was only dark. I finished the wine. I set the glass on the railing. My phone face up on the table beside me lit up 11 times between dinner and 10 o'clock. 7 of those calls were from Preston. 3 were from Nadine. 1 was from a number I did not immediately recognize, a 949 area code, Southern California. I did not answer it. Later that night, when I looked the number up in my contacts, I found it listed under a name I had added 8 months earlier and forgotten about, Elle Marsh, Nadine's mother. She had never called me before. Not once in the 3 years since Preston and Nadine had been together. I set the phone face down on the nightstand and went to sleep. By the time we reached Marseille the next morning, a gray port city that smelled of diesel and brine and good bread, the call count had climbed to 19. I read the notifications over coffee on the balcony, while Marcus stood inside the sitting room and quietly described the optional shore excursion to the Calanques, a series of limestone cliffs and hidden coves east of the city. "I'll walk on my own," I told him. "I like to find things without a map." "Of course," he said. He left a printed street guide on the table anyway, folded to the right page. I took it with me. Marseille was not on Dot's list. But I walked for 4 hours through the old port district, and the narrow streets above it, bought a small ceramic tile painted with a blue boat from a vendor on the Cour, Julien, and ate a bowl of bouillabaisse at a table outside a restaurant, whose name I did not write down, but whose smell I was certain I would remember for the rest of my life. I thought about Dot the whole time, not with the heavy grief of the first year after her death, but with something quieter, the way you think about someone who is traveling separately and will meet you at the next stop. I was back on the ship by 3 in the afternoon. 31 missed calls. I counted them the way I counted everything methodically, without emotion. 11 from Preston, 9 from Nadine, 7 from Loretta, 4 from Simone. I noted the ratio. Preston and Nadine were panicking. Loretta was pushing, but Simone had called 4 times and left no voicemails. She was watching, not demanding. There was a precision to that, a patience. I wrote in the notebook that night, day 3. 31 calls. Simone left no messages. I am beginning to understand the shape of this. Outside, the Mediterranean moved in long, slow swells. The ship cut through them without effort. I turned off the lamp and listened to the water for a while before I slept. 83 missed calls in 7 days, and not one of them from the person I should have been watching most closely. Before I tell you who that was and what I found in a message sent at 11:47 at night, drop the number 83 in the comments right now so I know you are still here with me. And a gentle note, some elements of this story have been shaped for storytelling and reflection. If that is not something you wish to continue with, this is a perfectly fine place to stop, no hard feelings at all. Rome does not care about your problems. That is the first thing you understand when you walk out of the port at Civitavecchia and take the 45-minute train into the city. The ruins do not shift to accommodate your mood. The cobblestones do not soften because you are carrying something heavy. Rome has been standing for 2,000 years, and it will be standing long after every petty grievance in your life has been reduced to dust. There is something deeply useful about that. I arrived at Roma Termini station at 9:15 in the morning on day 4 of the voyage. The platform was loud, crowded, smelling of espresso and warm stone, and the particular diesel exhaust of a city that never fully sleeps. I bought a small coffee from a bar near the exit, standing up the way Romans drink it, and turned my phone face up on the counter for the first time in 3 days. 47 missed calls. I did not react. I drank my coffee. I set the cup down, turned the phone face down again, and walked out into the Roman morning. I spent 6 hours in the city. I walked to the forum which Dot had written about in the notebook, with 3 exclamation points, and the note, "Warren will pretend he isn't moved. He will be moved." She was right. I stood at the edge of the Forum Romanum for 11 minutes. I counted and felt something I could not have named precisely, but that sat somewhere between grief and gratitude, and the particular ache of wishing someone were standing next to you. I walked to the Pantheon. I ate lunch at a small trattoria on a side street off the Piazza Navona, cacio e pepe, a glass of house white, a basket of bread. I finished entirely. I did not check my phone. On the train back to Civitavecchia, I finally opened the messages. I read them in order, oldest to newest, the way you review a shipment manifest systematically, without letting any single entry distract you from the whole. Preston's messages had a pattern. They started urgent. Dad, call me By day 2, they shifted to wounded. I don't understand why you won't pick up. This isn't like you. By day 3, they became plaintive, almost childlike. Dad, please just let me know you're okay. Nadine had sent 4 messages, each more measured than the last. No exclamation points, no emotional appeals, just careful, precise sentences. Warren, there appears to have been an administrative error with the cabin reservation. It would be helpful to speak when you have a moment. That was her first message. Her 4th, we are looking into the situation on our end. Please call when convenient. On our end. She was already building a defense. Loretta had sent 2 messages and called 7 times. Her first text read, "This is Loretta Marsh. I believe there has been a mistake regarding the cabin I was promised. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." Her second, Warren, "I have spoken with the cruise line, and they have confirmed the original reservation was in your name only. I need to understand what happened." She had signed both messages with her full name. The formality of it, Loretta Marsh, as though she were filing a complaint with a municipal office, told me everything I needed to know about how she saw the situation. She believed she had been wronged by an administrative error. She had not yet considered the alternative. And then there was Simone. Simone had called 4 times and sent 3 text messages. The first 2 were similar to what she had said on the phone, expressions of concern, gentle questions about my well-being, references to Preston being stressed. Standard, predictable. The kind of messages a worried daughter sends. The third message was sent at 11:47 on the night of day 2. Most people would have been asleep by then. I noted the timestamp. "Dad, I've been thinking. When you get back, I think we should sit down and talk about the house and the financial stuff. I know it's not great timing, but it would give me peace of mind to know everything is organized. You know, in case anything ever happened. Love you." I read that message 3 times. Then I put the phone in my jacket pocket and looked out the train window at the Italian countryside, dry hills, stone farmhouses, the occasional flash of a vineyard, and sat very still for the rest of the ride. I had been a logistics manager for 31 years. In that work, you learn to recognize 2 kinds of problems. The first kind is loud, the delayed shipment, the wrong address, the broken freight seal. These announce themselves. They are manageable. The second kind is quiet. It builds slowly in the background, while everyone is looking at the first kind. It is the kind of problem that only reveals itself when someone mentions something they should not have mentioned yet. The house, the financial stuff, in case anything ever happened. Simone was 34 years old. She had a job, an apartment, a salary. She had never once, in all the years since Dot had passed, mentioned the house or the financial stuff. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not when we had sorted through Dot's belongings together, not until now. That night, Marcus brought wine to the balcony without being asked. I was sitting with the notebook open on my knee, not writing, just looking at the page where Dot had written Santorini. Blue domes. "Bring the good camera and don't rush. We reach Santorini the day after tomorrow," Marcus said quietly, setting the glass on the railing beside me. "I know," I said. "Thank you, Marcus." He went inside without another word. I picked up my phone one more time and found a message from Bud Kowalski that had come in at 4 in the afternoon California time. "Warren, everything fine here? Chester ate well, but wanted to mention strange car parked outside your place twice this week. Silver sedan, couldn't make out the plates from my window. Probably nothing. Just thought you should know, Bud." I read the message twice. Then I set the phone down and wrote in the notebook in the margin, beside Dot's Santorini note, in handwriting that was smaller and more careful than usual. Day 7. 83 calls. Silver sedan outside the house. Simone asking about the house. This was never just about a cabin. I closed the notebook. Outside, the Mediterranean was dark and wide and entirely indifferent. Marcus knocked at 5:58 in the morning. He had promised back in Barcelona that he would have the balcony ready before sunrise. I had not expected him to take that literally. But when I opened the suite door, he was already standing there in his white jacket, holding a small tray with a French press, a single white cup, and a folded linen napkin. Behind him, through the open balcony doors, the sky was the particular shade of dark blue that exists for only about 20 minutes before dawn, the color that has no name but that every early riser knows by feel. "The ship will be anchored off Fira by 6:15, Marcus said. "The light comes up from the east. Port side is the right side this morning." Suite 712 was on the port side. He had requested it for this exact reason. I understood suddenly, back when he had first shown me to the room in Barcelona. "You planned for this," I said. "You mentioned your wife," he said simply. He set the tray on the balcony table and went inside without another word. I sat down in the chair he had angled toward the water and poured the coffee. It was 6:02. The ship was slowing. I could feel the change in the engine's rhythm through the soles of my feet, the long deceleration of a large vessel coming to rest like a held breath. And then Santorini appeared. I want to be precise about this because I think imprecision would be a disservice to what I saw. The island does not rise the way most land masses rise gradually, from a low line on the horizon up to a gradual hill. Santorini rises the way a wall rises. The cliffs come straight up from the water, dark volcanic rock, 300 feet of it, sheer and ancient. And on top of those cliffs in the early light of a September morning sat the white villages, Fira Oya, the smaller clusters between them, so bright against the dark rock and the pale sky that they seemed less like buildings and more like a statement, like something the island was insisting upon. I had seen photographs. Dot had photographs in the notebook, small prints she had cut from a magazine and taped to the page with her handwriting around them in blue ink. Blue domes. "Bring the good camera and don't rush." I reached into the carry-on bag I had brought to the balcony the night before, deliberately, because I had known this moment was coming, and took out the camera. It was a small Canon digital camera, silver, and slightly worn at the edges, with a nick on the lens cap from the time Dot had dropped it at the Grand Canyon in 2017. She had carried it on every trip they had taken together. After she died, I had found it in the drawer of her bedside table with a half-full memory card inside. I had not deleted the photos. I had not looked at them either. I had simply charged the battery, packed the camera, and brought it with me. I raised the camera and looked at Santorini through the viewfinder. My hands were steady. I was surprised by that. I took the first photograph at 6:19 as the sun cleared the eastern horizon, and the light hit the white buildings and turned them gold, then pink, then the particular blazing white that you only see in the Greek islands, a white so complete it looks almost aggressive. I took 11 photographs in total. I did not rush any of them. When I lowered the camera, I found that my face was wet. I had not noticed it happening. I did not wipe my eyes immediately. I sat with it for a moment. The grief and the gratitude, and the particular complicated joy of doing something beautiful in the absence of the person you most wanted beside you. Then I set the camera on the table, picked up the coffee cup, and said out loud to no one, and to her, "We made it to Santorini. Dot." My voice cracked on her name. I let it. I opened the notebook to the Santorini page and wrote below her magazine photographs in handwriting that was uneven. In a way mine almost never is, September 26th, 2023. The cliffs are exactly as you said. The white is aggressive. I used your camera. I did not rush. I stayed on the balcony until 9 o'clock. Marcus brought a second pot of coffee at 7:30 and a plate of fruit at 8 without being asked. He did not speak, which was the right thing. At 9:15 I went inside, washed my face, and called Bud. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had been awake for hours. Bud was a man who had worked the morning shift at his pharmacy for 40 years and had never fully retired from the habit of rising before 6. "How's the water?" he asked. "Perfect," I said. "Santorini. Dot's number 1, he said quietly. "Her number 1, I confirmed. There was a comfortable silence of about 4 seconds, the kind that old friends are allowed, and then I told him about Simone's message. The one sent at 11:47 at night. The house. The financial stuff. In case anything ever happened. Bud was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, "Warren, that car came back. 3rd time. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., silver sedan, California plates. But I was too far to read them. It sat there for 40 minutes and then left." "Did you take a photograph?" I asked. "I tried. Too far. But I wrote down the time and date in a notebook. June's idea." I sat up straighter. "June has been involved in this. I forwarded her your message," Bud said. "The one from Simone. I hope that's all right. I was worried and she was right there." "It's all right," I said. "What did she say?" There was a brief pause. I heard Bud set something down on a hard surface, his kitchen table, I imagined, with the yellow checked cloth Dot had always admired. "She said—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "She said, Warren, this reads like someone who is preparing a legal move." The morning light over Santorini was full and white and entirely beautiful. I looked at Dot's camera on the balcony table. 11 photographs. None of them rushed. "All right," I said. "Tell June I'll call her when we reach Dubrovnik." The coast of Dubrovnik appears differently depending on which direction you approach it from. From the north, you see the modern city, first apartment blocks, a marina, the sprawl of a working port. From the south, approaching by sea, you see the old city. The walls come first thick limestone battlements that have been standing since the 14th century, running along the cliff top above the Adriatic, in a pale gray line that looks less like fortification and more like the city's spine. Then the terracotta rooftops inside the walls. Then the bell towers. Then finally, the pile gate, the western entrance to the old city, an arched stone gateway that has been the first thing visitors see for 600 years. I had looked at a photograph of it in Dot's notebook. She had written beside it, "The real thing, not a theme park. You'll know the difference the moment you see it." She was right. I knew the difference. Silver Whisper anchored offshore at 7:40 in the morning on September 29th. The tenders, small motorized boats that ferry passengers from ship to shore when a port is too shallow for direct docking, began running at 8. I was on the second tender, seated near the bow, with the camera in my jacket pocket and my phone in my hand. I called June Kowalski at 8:17 while the tender was still crossing the harbor. She answered immediately, which told me Bud had warned her to expect the call. "Warren," she said. Her voice was measured and clear, the voice of someone who spent her professional life making complicated things comprehensible. "How are you holding up?" "I'm in Dubrovnik," I said. "I'm holding up fine. Tell me what I need to know." "All right." I heard her shuffle papers. First, Simone's message, the one you forwarded to Dad. The language she used, the house, financial stuff, in case anything ever happened, is consistent with someone who is either researching or has already begun the process of petitioning for conservatorship or guardianship. In California, that requires a court filing that argues the subject, you, Warren, is unable to manage their own finances or personal care. It's a significant legal step. It requires medical documentation, witness statements, and a formal hearing. The tender bumped gently against the dock. I waited until the other passengers had begun moving toward the gangway before I spoke. "She would need a doctor to sign off on something like that," I said. "Yes," June said. "And that brings me to the second thing. Dad mentioned you were concerned about medication. Has anything felt different physically in the past few months?" I thought about that carefully. "My vitamin D. I've been taking it for 2 years. The past 6 weeks or so, I've felt more tired than usual. I thought it was grief. Or age. Warren." Her voice did not change in pitch, but it sharpened. Do not take any more of that supplement until I can have it tested. Can you ask Dad to retrieve the bottle from your bathroom and hold it separately? Yes, I said. Third thing. The phone call from Loretta Marsh, the one where she used a different name and claimed to be acting on your behalf. That is potentially actionable under California Penal Code 529. False personation. If she made any material gain from that, even an attempted gain, it becomes a felony. She attempted to change my booking, I said. Nolan blocked it. He has a record. Good, June said. Keep Nolan available. And Warren, if you encounter any of them today, do not argue. Do not raise your voice. If you can record the conversation legally, do it. California is a two-party consent state, so you can only record if you inform them or if they have no reasonable expectation of privacy. A public outdoor space qualifies as the latter. Understood, I said. I stepped off the tender onto the Dubrovnik dock. Thank you, June. Call me when you're back on the ship, she said. And Warren, enjoy Dubrovnik. The walk from the dock to the Pile Gate took 12 minutes through the new harbor district, past souvenir vendors and tour group marshals with colored flags and a coffee stand, where a woman was arguing pleasantly with her supplier about the price of oat milk. Dubrovnik, in late September, had shed most of its summer crowds. The streets were busy, but not frantic. The light was the particular clear gold of Mediterranean autumn, less aggressive than summer, more considered. I reached the Pile Gate at 8:49. I almost walked straight past them. Preston was standing just inside the outer arch of the gate, holding a paper coffee cup and looking at his phone. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt that looked slightly wrinkled, the kind of wrinkle that comes from an interior cabin with limited hanging space and no butler to sort the luggage. Nadine was beside him, her oversized sunglasses on her posture, carrying the particular tension of a woman who had spent 9 days on a ship that had not met her expectations. And Loretta was 3 steps ahead of them both, already through the gate, already turning to say something to a tour guide who was clearly trying to redirect a different group entirely. She saw me first. I watched her register me, the slight widening of her eyes, the half-second of recalculation. And then she turned fully and said loudly enough that 2 passing tourists looked over Warren. Preston's head came up from his phone. His face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds: surprise, relief, confusion, and finally a kind of desperate hopefulness that I found painful to look at. "Dad," he said. "Dad, where have you been? We've been calling." "I know," I said. "I saw the calls." Loretta stepped forward. She was wearing the coral blazer again, which struck me as a poor choice for a walking tour of a medieval city, but I kept that observation to myself. Her chin was lifted, and her eyes were direct, and she had the bearing of a woman who had prepared this conversation in advance. "I think you owe me an explanation," she said. "I don't think I do," I said, "but I'll give you one anyway." I kept my voice even, not cold even, the way you speak in a logistics review when the numbers are clear and the outcome is not in dispute. That cabin was booked in my name with my money in memory of my wife. You were never part of that reservation. You were never authorized to use it. What you attempted to do, contacting the cruise line using a name that wasn't yours, claiming authority you didn't have, is something my attorney has already reviewed. The word attorney landed the way I expected it to. Loretta's chin dropped a fraction. "Your attorney. Her name is June Kowalski," I said. "She's in Monterey. She has copies of everything, the original booking, the verification logs, the call record from August. If you'd like to pursue this further, she's the one to contact." Preston put his hand on Loretta's arm. His coffee cup was trembling slightly. "Dad, we didn't mean for it to go this far. Can we just—" "When I'm home," I said. "We'll talk when I'm home." I looked at him for a moment, my son, 38 years old, holding a shaking coffee cup in a medieval gateway in Croatia, and felt something that was not quite anger and not quite pity, but contained elements of both. "I hope you're enjoying the cruise, Preston. I mean that." I walked through the pile gate and into the old city. Behind me, I heard Nadine say to Preston, in a voice she had not bothered to lower, "She already has a lawyer." Preston did not answer. I did not look back. The old city of Dubrovnik, once you pass through the pile gate, is essentially a single long street called the Stradun, with narrower lanes branching off on either side up the hillside. In summer, it is reportedly so crowded that you cannot stop walking without causing a disturbance. In late September, it was busy but breathable tour groups moving in clusters, independent travelers with cameras, a few locals who walked with the particular purposeful efficiency of people who had somewhere to actually be. I walked the length of the Stradun slowly from the gate to the old harbor at the far end, and then sat on a low stone wall near the water and looked at the Adriatic for a long time without thinking about anything in particular. That is a skill I had not possessed before Dot died, and had learned afterward imperfectly and gradually, the ability to let the mind go quiet without filling the silence with planning. After about 20 minutes, the planning came back anyway. It always does. I returned to the tender dock at 2 in the afternoon. The crossing back to the Silver Whisper took 11 minutes. Marcus met me at the gangway with a cold glass of water and the information that the ship would depart Dubrovnik at 6 and that dinner service in the main dining room began at 7:30. "I'll eat on the balcony tonight," I told him. "Of course," he said. In the suite, I changed out of my walking shoes, sat at the small writing desk beside the window, and took out 2 things: Dot's navy notebook and a single sheet of the ship's stationery, cream-colored, with the Silver Whisper insignia at the top, the kind of paper that feels deliberate in a way that most paper does not. I had been thinking about writing this letter since Santorini. I had decided at some point between the Stradun and the harbor wall that I was going to do it today. Not tomorrow. Today. I wrote, "Dot, I am writing this on the Silver Whisper somewhere between Dubrovnik and the open sea. It is September 29th, 2023. The suite is on the port side upper deck, and this afternoon the light coming through the glass is the color of weak tea, which I think you would have found poetic, and I find accurate. I went to Santorini on the 26th. I used your camera. I did not rush. The cliffs are exactly as you described them, and the white is exactly as aggressive as you said it would be. I took 11 photographs. I don't know if any of them are good. I think you would have taken 40 and narrowed them down to 3 and been right about which 3. I also went to Dubrovnik today. I walked through the pile gate. You were right, it is not a theme park. I could feel 600 years of it. Some things have happened on this trip that I did not plan for. I am not going to explain all of them in this letter because some of them are still unresolved, and I do not want to commit the unresolved things to paper until I understand them fully. What I will say is this: I am all right. I am in fact more all right than I have been in a long time. I think coming here was the right thing to do. I think you knew it would be, which is probably why you wrote the list in the first place. I miss you every day. Not the heavy way I did in the first year. A different way now, the way you miss a road you know well when you're on a detour. You keep thinking I know a better route. But the detour has its own things to see. Warren. I folded the letter and placed it inside the notebook between the Dubrovnik page and the blank pages at the back. Marcus knocked at 6:45 with a covered tray. I was still at the desk. He set the tray on the table without comment, but as he turned to leave, he paused at the door and looked at the stationery on the desk. The pen, the closed notebook, the particular stillness of a room where someone has just finished saying something that needed to be said. "Will there be anything else tonight, Mr. Caldwell?" "No," I said. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." He nodded once. The door closed quietly. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Bud. "Bud, 2 things. First, in my bathroom cabinet, there is an orange prescription-style bottle labeled Vitamin D3 2000 IU. Please remove it and do not let anyone else touch it. Put it somewhere separate. June will explain. Second, I have a security camera on the front porch. The app is on the old iPad in the kitchen drawer. Can you check the footage from the past 3 weeks and see if that silver sedan appears on it? If it does, note the timestamps and plate if visible. Don't delete anything. His reply came 40 minutes later while the ship was clearing the Dubrovnik Harbor Channel. Got the bottle. Wrapped it in a plastic bag, labeled it, put it in my freezer behind the peas where nobody will look. Checked the camera app. Warren, that car shows up 4 times. I can see a partial plate on the 3rd appearance. Starts with 7K California plate. I wrote it down. June says she knows someone who can run it. I read the message twice. Then I called June. She answered on the first ring this time. Warren, how did Dubrovnik go? I walked through the pile gate, I said, and I ran into them. I gave her the summary in the way I had always given operational reports, chronological, specific, without editorial. She listened without interrupting, which was a quality I had always associated with the best kind of professional. When I finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. All right, she said. That's useful. The attorney reference landed. I expected it would. Warren, I need to tell you something. A brief pause. I spoke with Detective Pruitt this afternoon at the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. About the conservatorship filing, I said. About that, she said. And about something else. Detective Pruitt said something interesting. He said Simone filed a document with the Monterey County Superior Court 6 weeks ago. The ship moved steadily through the dark water outside my window. 6 weeks ago, I had been at home on Sycamore Lane packing a suitcase and feeding Chester, and fully believing that the most complicated thing about the next 14 days would be the ocean crossing. What kind of document, I asked. That, June said carefully, is what we are still determining. The last 3 days on the Silver Whisper were the quietest of the voyage. Not uncomfortably quiet, the kind of quiet that arrives when a thing has been decided, and all that remains is to let the decision settle into its proper shape. I spent those days reading on the balcony, walking the upper deck in the early mornings, eating meals that Marcus arranged with the same unhurried precision he had brought to every other aspect of the journey. The Mediterranean in early October had a different quality than it had in September. The light was lower, the water a deeper blue, the wind carrying the first suggestion of autumn beneath the warmth. On the morning of the last full day at sea, Marcus brought breakfast at 7 and remained in the doorway for a moment longer than usual. We dock in Barcelona tomorrow at 8, he said. Is there anything you need arranged for your departure? No, I said. I have the car to the airport at 9:30. I looked at him. Marcus, you've been exceptional. I want you to know that. He accepted this the way he accepted everything, without false modesty and without excessive acknowledgement. It has been a privilege, Mr. Caldwell, he said. I hope the voyage gave you what you came for. I thought about that for a moment. Santorini, the pile gate, the letter I had written on ship's stationery and placed inside the Navy notebook, the 11 photographs on Dot's camera that I had not yet looked at, but was looking forward to looking at. It gave me more than I came for, I said, which is the best possible outcome. He smiled, the first full smile I had seen from him in 14 days, and went inside to clear the breakfast tray. I landed at SFO on October 4th at 6 in the evening. The flight from Barcelona via New York took the same 13 hours it had taken going the other direction, but time moves differently on return journeys. You are no longer anticipating. You are integrating, fitting what you experienced into the shape of the life you left behind. Bud was sitting on my front steps when the cab pulled up to 4 Sycamore Lane. He was wearing his green cardigan and holding a thermos, and Chester was sitting beside him on the step in the particular self-satisfied way of cats who have been fed on schedule and resent the implication that they were worried about anyone. How was it? Bud asked as I carried my bag up the path. It was exactly right, I said. He handed me a folded piece of paper from his cardigan pocket. June asked me to give you this. She'll call tomorrow morning. I unfolded it. It was a single handwritten line in June's precise cursive petition for conservatorship of person and estate. California Probate Code 1800. Call me at 8 a.m. I read it twice, folded it again, and put it in my jacket pocket. Come in, I said to Bud. I'll make coffee. We sat in the kitchen for an hour. Bud told me about the silver sedan, 4 appearances total on the security camera. The last one 2 days before I landed. He had written down the timestamps in a small spiral notebook, the kind pharmacists use for inventory, and the partial plate appeared clearly on the third recording 7KR. The image quality was good enough that June's contact had already run a partial search. I was on my second cup of coffee when Preston rang the doorbell. He was standing on the porch with a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, a good one. Not the cheapest on the shelf, but not the most expensive either, which told me he had thought about it, and an expression that combined practiced apology with something less comfortable underneath. Bud stood, said good evening to Preston, in a perfectly neutral tone, and let himself out through the back door without being asked. "Dad," Preston said, "can I come in?" "Of course," I said. "Sit down, I'll get glasses." We sat at the kitchen table. Preston poured. He was quieter than usual, Preston, who filled every room he entered with some form of noise, whether words or movement, or the restless energy of a man who was uncomfortable with stillness. That evening, he was still. I noted it. "I owe you an apology," he said. "What happened in Barcelona with the cabin with Loretta, I should never have let it get to that point. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong, and I let it happen anyway, and I'm sorry for that." It was a good apology, as apologies go. Specific enough to be real, general enough to avoid the uncomfortable details. I had written enough operational incident reports to recognize the structure. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it as far as it went. We talked for 40 minutes. Preston asked about the cruise, the cities, the food, the ship. He was genuinely curious, I thought, or was performing genuine curiosity well enough that the distinction did not matter. He asked about Santorini. I told him about the cliffs and the light and the camera. He did not ask about Simone. In 40 minutes of conversation, covering the cruise, the Mediterranean, the confrontation at the Pile Gate, the apology, and 3 glasses of wine between us, Preston did not once mention his sister's name. Not in passing. Not by accident. Not in the way that people mention things they are not thinking about, because they are not thinking about them. When someone conspicuously avoids a subject, the avoidance is itself a form of information. After Preston left, I stood at the kitchen sink and rinsed the glasses and thought about that for a long time. My phone rang at 9:47. "June, I didn't want to wait until morning," she said. "Detective Pruitt called an hour ago. Warren the partial plate on the silver sedan. 7KR. It's registered to a rental company out of Irvine. The rental was paid for with a credit card." A brief pause. "The card is in Simone's name." I set the wine glass down on the counter very carefully. "How long was the rental?" I asked. 3 weeks, June said, starting August 22nd. August 22nd. 3 days after I had booked the Sky Suite. 3 days after I had handed the envelope to Bud. "She knew," I said, not a question. "It looks that way," June said. "Warren Detective Pruitt wants to meet with you. He said Thursday works if you're recovered from the travel." "Tell him Thursday is fine," I said. "And June, thank you." I hung up the phone and stood in the quiet kitchen on Sycamore Lane and listened to Chester moving around somewhere in the back of the house hunting shadows the way he always did after dark. Simone had rented a car 3 days after I rerouted the shipment. She had been watching the house. She had known. The morning after June called, I slept until 6:30, which was late for me. Chester was already at his bowl when I came downstairs, looking at me with the resigned patience of an animal that has learned to manage its expectations of the people around it. I fed him, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. In logistics, there is a document called a discrepancy report. When a shipment arrives damaged, misdirected, or short of what was ordered, you file a discrepancy report. You list what was promised. You list what was delivered. You list the gap between those two things in specific, measurable terms. You do not use emotional language. You do not editorialize. You simply describe precisely and completely the difference between what should have happened and what did. I had been composing this particular discrepancy report in my head for 6 weeks. I wrote for 40 minutes. When I was done, I had 4 pages of notes, dates, amounts, names, events in sequence, and a clear sense of the shape of what I needed to present to June. I showered, changed, and drove the 23 miles from Carmel to Monterey along Highway 1 with the windows down. The coast road in October smells of sage and salt, and the particular cold cleanness of a morning that has not yet been used. June Kowalski's office was on the 3rd floor of a building on Alvarado Street, 2 blocks from the waterfront. The waiting room had a rubber plant that appeared to have survived there for decades, and a receptionist named Dolores who offered coffee without being asked and brought it without delay. June came out to meet me at 9:05, shook my hand, with the brisk efficiency of someone for whom time was a managed resource, and led me into her office. She was 42, dark-haired, with the particular focused energy of a person who had grown up watching her father, a retired pharmacist, who still kept a notebook for everything, treat precision as a form of respect. She had been practicing civil and criminal law in Monterey County for 16 years. "Let's start with the conservatorship petition," she said, sitting down across from me and opening a folder. Simone filed on August 15th. The petition names you as the proposed conservatee and argues that you demonstrate, and I'm quoting directly here, diminished capacity to manage financial affairs and personal care decisions as evidenced by recent erratic behavior and increasing social withdrawal. I set my coffee cup down. Erratic behavior, I repeated. The petition cites 3 instances. June looked at her notes. First, that you canceled a pre-planned family vacation without explanation. Second, that you have become increasingly secretive about financial matters. Third, that you have been observed acting in a confused or disoriented manner on multiple occasions. I sat with that for a moment. The canceled vacation, that was the cruise booking. The financial secrecy, that was the Sky Suite, the envelope to Bud, all of it. The confused or disoriented behavior that I suspected was Simone's characterization of my grief. My quietness in the months after Dot died. The long walks, the chess games with Bud, the evenings I spent in the study rather than answering the phone. Someone had taken the shape of my mourning and reframed it as evidence of incompetence. "What medical documentation did she submit?" I asked. "A letter from a Dr. Ellison in San Jose," June said. "He is described as your primary care physician. He is not your primary care physician. Your actual doctor is Dr. Patricia Halver at Carmel Valley Medical Group, and I called her office yesterday. Dr. Halver has no record of referring you to or communicating with any physician named Ellison, and she confirmed that in her most recent assessment, conducted in March of this year, you demonstrated no cognitive or functional impairments of any kind." "So the letter is fabricated," I said. "The letter is under investigation," June said precisely. "That determination will be made officially by Detective Pruitt's office. What it means for us right now is that the foundation of the conservatorship petition is significantly compromised. I've already filed a response with the Superior Court, contesting the medical documentation and requesting an independent evaluation." We moved on to the civil claim. June had prepared the invoice with the same precision she brought to everything else. She walked me through it line by line. The original booking on Silver Whisper had been $8,950. The Sky Suite, which I had been compelled to book as a direct result of the fraudulent attempt to seize my reservation, had cost $14,200. The difference, $5,250, was the first line item on the invoice. The lost deposit of $3,800, which had been forfeited when the original reservation was manipulated and then canceled, was the second. Legal fees to date, filing costs, consultation hours, and court documentation and came to $6,200. Documented material and consequential damages, including additional travel costs, incurred as a direct result of the booking interference and supported by receipts, were assessed at $6,250. Total $21,500. Directed to Loretta Marsh as the individual who had made the fraudulent call and initiated the attempt to seize the reservation. I want to be clear, June said. This is a civil claim. We are not alleging criminal conduct in this document that is Detective Pruitt's domain. What we are alleging is that Loretta Marsh's actions caused you quantifiable financial harm, and we are seeking recovery of that harm through the civil courts. She'll refuse to pay, I said. Almost certainly, June agreed. Which is why we file it. We create a record. We establish the timeline. And we give her an opportunity to settle before this becomes considerably more complicated for her. I signed the invoice authorization at 10:45. June sent it via certified mail, with return receipt, requested the following morning, October 7th, a Saturday, to Loretta Marsh's address in Southern California, which June had obtained through public records. Thursday morning, October 9th, I drove back to Monterey. The Monterey County Sheriff's Office was a low, sand-colored building on Blanco Circle. Detective Harmon Pruitt met me in a small conference room that smelled of old coffee and new carpet. He was 52 broad through the shoulders, with a gray mustache, and the particular economy of movement that belongs to people who have spent decades in rooms where efficiency matters. He shook my hand once, firmly sat down, and opened a folder without preamble. Mr. Caldwell, he said, the lab results came back on the supplement bottle this morning. I had been expecting this. I had been expecting it, and I still felt the room go very slightly tilted when he said it. What did they find? I asked. The bottle was labeled Vitamin D3 2000 IU. The actual contents were a mixture of vitamin D3 and a sedative compound, specifically a low-dose benzodiazepine. Not enough to cause acute harm. Enough administered daily over 6 to 8 weeks to cause pronounced fatigue, mild cognitive dulling, and in a clinical assessment, the kind of presentation that could be described as diminished capacity, I said. Yes, Pruitt said. He set the folder down. We also know how access was obtained. Simone visited the house twice in July. Both appearances were captured on the porch camera's motion log timestamps his office had already matched against her phone's location data. Diminished capacity, I said. Yes, Pruitt said. He looked at me directly. Mr. Caldwell, I want to be straightforward with you. We are now looking at a potential charge of administering a harmful substance which under California Penal Code 347 is a felony. We are also looking at the false medical documentation, the unauthorized vehicle surveillance, and the conservatorship petition built on fabricated evidence. This is not a simple family dispute. No, I said. It never was. He nodded slowly. Then he leaned forward slightly. We'd like to move carefully on this, he said. If we act too quickly, we risk alerting the subjects and losing the opportunity to document additional evidence. What I'd like to propose, he paused, is a controlled situation. We allow events to proceed naturally. We prepare. We document. And when the subjects make their next move, we are ready for it. He looked at me steadily. Mr. Caldwell, if you're willing, we'd like to let them come to you. Yes, I said. Let them come. Pruitt nodded once and opened a second folder. Passive documentation, he said. That is what this looks like. You do not invite them. You do not hint at documents or opportunity. You live exactly as you normally would. What we do is make sure that if they act on their existing intentions, every action is fully recorded. He looked at me steadily. I want to be clear about entrapment, Mr. Caldwell. That defense only applies when law enforcement induces someone to commit a crime they had no prior intention of committing. Given the August petition, the rental car, and the medication, the argument that Simone required inducement from us is not one I expect a jury to find persuasive. Understood, I said. The plan was simple. Pruitt would supply 2 additional exterior cameras, motion-activated night vision, to supplement the existing porch unit. Bud would install them. Inside, a secondary recording device managed by Pruitt's office would run independently of any system that could be accessed or disabled from outside the house. I would change nothing about my routine. Bud arrived the following morning with his old toolbox and had both cameras in place within 90 minutes. He tested each one from his phone, wrote the coordinates in his spiral notebook, and said nothing beyond what was necessary. At the kitchen door, before he left, he paused. "She's your daughter, Warren." "I know," I said. He nodded and went home. On October 15th, the certified mail tracking confirmed Loretta had received June's letter at 11:43 in the morning. I noted the time and sent June a one-line message. 2 days later, Preston called. His voice was tight in a way the Napa wine visit had not prepared me for the sound of a man whose carefully assembled composure had been disrupted by something he had not anticipated. "Dad, Loretta got a letter from a lawyer. Can we talk in person?" "Come by tomorrow," I said. "I'll make lunch." He arrived at noon on the 18th with nothing in his hands. He ate the sandwich I made and talked carefully around the edges of the invoice without ever landing on the center of it. At 1:47, while I was in the back garden cutting the Rosemary Dot's October instruction, which I had followed every year since she first taught me, Preston made a phone call from the kitchen table. He did not know about the secondary recording device. Pruitt showed me the transcript 4 days later. Preston had said, "She has a lawyer, a real one, and there's a camera on the porch." A pause. "Then I know, but we need to do this before the 24th. If she files that court response, it's going to—" Another pause. "Fine, not the front. The utility door on the side. I still have the code." He left at 2:15. He was friendly at the door. That evening, Bud texted, "Camera got all of it." I was still reading the message when June called. "Warren, Simone filed an emergency motion to expedite the conservatorship hearing this afternoon." A brief pause. "She's set a date, October 24th. I looked at the calendar on the kitchen wall, the scenic California coast calendar. Same brand Dot had chosen 11 years ago that I replaced every January without fail. 6 days. "Are you ready for this?" June asked. I thought about the 11 photographs on Dot's camera, the letter on Ship's stationery, Bud's spiral notebook, the secondary recording device that had been running quietly in the kitchen 3 hours ago. "I've been ready," I said, "since August." The cameras were running. The recording device was active. And I was sitting in a dark living room with a cat on my knee waiting for a sound I had known was coming for weeks. Before I tell you what happened next, leave October 21st. In the comments, let me know you have made it this far. A quick note, some moments in this story are fictional, built to carry a message worth hearing. If that is not what you signed up for, no judgment. You are free to go. But if you are staying, what comes next is the part that changes everything. The house on Sycamore Lane is very quiet after 10 o'clock. That had been true even when Dot was alive. She was an early sleeper, and the neighborhood followed suit, the lights going out in sequence down the street like a tide going out. I had always been the last one awake. Old habit. That night, I sat in the dark living room with Chester on my knee and waited. I had left the utility door's alarm sensor disabled as Pruitt had instructed. The exterior cameras were running. The secondary recording device in the study had been active since 8. At 10:17, I heard the side gate latch lift, the particular metallic click I had heard 10,000 times and would have recognized in my sleep. Then the soft electronic tone of the keypad. 6 digits. Preston still had the code. I had not changed it. Pruitt had advised against it. Changing the code would have signaled that the recording existed, and the trap would have closed on nothing. The utility door opened. Two sets of footsteps moved through the laundry room across the kitchen tile and turned left toward the study. I heard the study door push open. A light came on beneath the door, the desk lamp from the angle of it. I stood up carefully, set Chester on the chair, and walked to the study door. I opened it. Simone was at the filing cabinet, the second drawer open, a folder in her hand. Preston was at my desk with his phone raised, photographing something on the surface. They both turned at exactly the same moment. Simone's expression moved through surprise, calculation, and recovery in about 2 seconds. Preston's did not recover. His phone dropped to his side and his face went the color of old paper. "I've been expecting you," I said. No one spoke for a moment. Then I said, "I made coffee. Sit down." Simone set the folder on top of the cabinet carefully, as though it still mattered what she did with it. "Dad," she said, her voice controlled and quiet, "this is not what it looks like." "Simone," I said, "I know exactly what it looks like. I've known since the rental car. That landed. I watched it land." Preston made a sound that was not quite words, a broken syllable that collapsed into something I can only describe as a man realizing fully and finally the distance between where he thought he was standing and where he actually was. His eyes went bright, and his voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't. Simone said it was just paperwork, that you needed help managing things, and I—" "Preston." I said his name quietly, not unkindly. "Stop." He stopped. There was a knock at the front door. I walked to the front of the house and opened it. Detective Pruitt stood on the porch with 2 officers behind him. He looked at me once with an expression that asked the only question that mattered. "Study," I said. He nodded and stepped inside. I stood in the hallway and listened to Pruitt's voice, measured, authoritative, entirely without drama. As he identified himself, asked both of them to step away from the filing cabinet and the desk, and began reading from the card he carried in his left breast pocket. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Preston was crying before Pruitt finished. Not quietly, the heaving, helpless kind of crying that belongs to people who have held something together past the point where it could hold. Simone did not cry. She stood with her arms at her sides and her chin level, and looked at a point on the wall above my head. As Pruitt guided her toward the front door, she turned and looked at me directly for the first time all evening. "This is not what it looks like," she said again. "Simone," I said, "it is exactly what it looks like." She held my gaze for 3 seconds. Then she looked away. I stood on the porch and watched the patrol car's taillights until they turned the corner at the end of Sycamore Lane and disappeared. The street was quiet again. The neighbors' lights had not come on. I went back inside. On the living room table, where I had left it before sitting down to wait, was Dot's Navy notebook. I had not opened the last page, not yet. Bud arrived at 7:15 the next morning with a thermos and no particular explanation for why he was there. He sat down at the kitchen table, poured 2 cups, and pushed one across to me without a word. Chester investigated his shoelaces and then lost interest. We drank coffee and did not say much. It was enough. Detective Pruitt arrived at 9 o'clock precisely. He sat across from me at the same table, declined the coffee, and opened his folder with the efficient brevity of a man who understood that the people he spoke with had already been through enough. "Simone was held without bail through the night," he said. "The administering charge under Penal Code 347 carries significant weight. The lab results were unambiguous. Her attorney filed for bail this morning. The judge set it at $50,000. She'll likely be released by this afternoon with a no-contact order in place regarding you and this property." "And Preston?" I asked. "Released last night on $25,000. He's cooperating." Pruitt said it without editorial. "That will matter later." He went through the rest methodically. The medical documentation submitted with the conservatorship petition had been traced to a Dr. Ellison, whose name did not appear in the California Medical Board's license registry. The document was fabricated. The petition built on that foundation would be formally dismissed by the Superior Court. The hearing scheduled for October 24th was already canceled. The district attorney's office is reviewing the file on Ms. Marsh as well, Pruitt added. The false personation charge under Penal Code 529. That determination will take time, but the cruise line's verification records are strong documentation. I understand, I said. After Pruitt left, June called. The court confirmed the dismissal this morning, she said. And Warren Loretta's attorney reached out. She's offering to settle the civil claim. Their number is $8,000. I looked out the kitchen window at the rosemary I had cut back 10 days ago. It was already showing new growth at the tips, the optimistic, slightly unreasonable persistence of plants that do not know when to stop. The number is 21,500, I said. It does not change. June was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll tell them. That afternoon, she sent me a sealed envelope, a physical copy delivered by courier containing 2 documents. The first was the dismissed conservatorship petition. The second was a printout of an email chain obtained through the search warrant Pruitt's office had executed between Simone and Preston, dated July 9th and 10th. 10 weeks before the cruise. 11 days before the meeting at Nadine's house that I had only learned about through inference. I read the emails at the kitchen table while Chester slept in the afternoon sun on the windowsill. Simone had written to Preston, "The conservatorship is the cleanest route. If we can establish diminished capacity before he changes the will, the estate transfers under court supervision. We control the petition. We control the narrative. The cruise cancellation gives us the erratic behavior we need to document." I read it twice. Then I set it down on the table. In 31 years of logistics work, I had opened thousands of documents, manifests, reports, contracts, discrepancy, files. I had read things that were wrong, things that were mistaken, things that were careless. I had never read anything written by someone who shared my name that made me feel the particular cold clarity I felt reading those 2 paragraphs. I sat with it for a long time. Then I went to the living room, picked up Dot's Navy notebook from the table, where it had sat since the night before, and opened it to the last page. She had written there in her careful, unhurried cursive a single line I had not seen before. "Warren, whatever happens next, you'll know what to do." My throat tightened. I pressed my hand flat against the page for a moment. Then I picked up a pen and wrote beneath her words in my own handwriting, "I did Dot." I think I finally did. November came to Carmel the way it always does, quietly, without announcement, the light shifting from the flat gold of October to something cooler and more considered, the kind of light that makes the cypress trees along the coast look like they were painted rather than grown. The marine layer came in later each morning now, and when it burned off, it left behind a sky that was pale and clean and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened in the weeks before. I had always liked November. Dot had preferred October. She said October had better light for photographs and more dramatic shadows, and that November was just October's quieter, less interesting younger sibling. I had disagreed then. I disagreed now even more. I was at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee when June called on the 7th. "Warren, Loretta's attorney confirmed this morning. The full amount, $21,500. The check will arrive by end of week." I looked out the window at the garden. The rosemary was coming back properly now, thick and green at the base where I had cut it in October. The optimistic, slightly unreasonable persistence of plants that do not know when to stop. Dot had planted that rosemary in the 2nd year after we moved in. She had said rosemary was the most reliable thing in any garden because it asked for almost nothing and gave back more than you expected. She had been right about that too. "Thank you, June," I said, "for all of it, not just the invoice." "That's what I'm here for," she said. Then after a brief pause, "How are you?" I thought about that honestly, the way she deserved. "Better than I expected," I said, which is probably the best answer I've got right now. She laughed a short, real laugh, the kind that does not require a setup, and told me to call if I needed anything. I told her I would. I meant it. I sat with the phone for a moment after the call ended. $21,500. The number that June had prepared with the same precision she brought to everything. The number I had refused to move from when Loretta's attorney had offered $8,000, the number that now existed as a confirmed fact rather than a claim. I did not feel triumphant about it. I felt something quieter than that, the particular stillness of a discrepancy report that has been filed, reviewed, and closed. Eleanor Finch had called the week before when word had reached her through Bud that the trip was done and I was home. We had talked for nearly an hour. I had told her about Santorini, the cliffs, the camera, the 11 photographs, the way my hands had been steady when I expected them not to be. She had been quiet for a long moment on the phone, and then said, in the voice she used when something had moved her past the point of ordinary language, "Dot would have made you describe every single one." She was right. I had described all 11. Eleanor had listened to everyone without interrupting, which was the greatest possible courtesy she could have extended. Bud came by that afternoon at 2 o'clock, the way he came by most afternoons, now. Not because either of us had planned it, but because the habit had formed in the weeks since October 21st, the way habits form when people have been through something together and find that proximity is easier than its absence. He was wearing his green cardigan. Chester appeared from somewhere in the back of the house and inspected his shoelaces with the focused attention of an animal performing a professional duty, then wandered away satisfied. Bud stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at the wall beside the bookcase without speaking for a long moment. I had hung 3 framed photographs there the previous weekend. They were printed from Dot's camera. The 11 images from Santorini narrowed down after a long time of looking to the 3 that were truest to what I had seen and felt that morning. The first was the cliffs at first light, before the sun had fully cleared the eastern horizon, the volcanic rock still dark against a sky moving from blue to gray to the first pale suggestion of gold. The second was the white dome of a small chapel against a sky so completely aggressively blue that it looked implausible, the kind of blue that makes you understand why Dot had written the word non-negotiable beside Santorini's name on page 4. The third was the harbor at Fira, looking down from the cliff-top small fishing boats on water the color of green glass in the early morning, before the tourist ferries arrived. She would have picked those same 3, Bud said finally. I know, I said. That's how I knew they were right. He came inside. We played one game of chess at the kitchen table, which he won, without either of us talking very much about it. Drank coffee and sat in the particular comfortable silence of people for whom the important things have already been said, and what remains is simply the pleasure of the other person's company. After he left, I stood in the living room for a while and looked at the photographs. Then I sat down and opened the Navy notebook. Dot had bought it at a stationery shop in Chicago in 2019, on a work trip she had taken alone because I was managing a freight crisis in Rotterdam and could not go. She had called me from the shop to describe it navy blue, cloth-covered thin gold ribbon marker, and I had said it sounded like every other notebook, and she had said I was missing the point entirely, which I was. She had carried it in her bag for the next 3 years, filling it with the places she wanted to go and the things she wanted to feel when she got there. Santorini on page 4, Dubrovnik on page 9, Amalfi on page 11. A dozen others, some with small photographs cut from magazines and taped carefully to the page, some with just a sentence, some with nothing but a name and a small hand-drawn star beside it. I had carried that notebook across an ocean and back. I had written in it for the first time on the day we left Barcelona. I had placed a letter inside it in Dubrovnik. I had tucked Captain Hargreaves's card between its pages somewhere over the Adriatic. It had been on my kitchen table on the night of October 21st, and it had been the first thing I saw when I came back inside after watching the patrol car's taillights disappear around the corner at the end of Sycamore Lane. I opened it to the last page. Her line was there. Then mine written the afternoon after Pruitt left. "Warren, whatever happens next, you'll know what to do." I did. I think I finally did. I picked up the pen and wrote one more line below both of ours, pressing the pen down a little harder than I needed to, the way you press down when you want something to last. We made it. Every single stop. I closed the notebook. Set it on the bookcase beside the 3 framed photographs in the place where I could see it from the kitchen table every morning while the coffee brewed and the light came through the window that faced exactly the right direction. Chester jumped onto the chair beside me, turned twice with the deliberate ceremony of a cat who takes his arrangements seriously, and settled. Outside, the November light moved slowly across the garden, across the rosemary. Coming back at the base across the lemon tree Dot had planted the year we moved in, across the pale sky above the rooftops of Sycamore Lane. I poured the last of the coffee, sat back down at the kitchen table, looked at the 3 photographs on the wall. Dot's camera, Dot's list, Dot's light on the water at Santorini, and felt for the first time in a long time that the house was exactly the right size for the life that was still in it. If there is one thing this family story taught me, it is that dignity is not something other people can take from you. They can take a cabin, a booking, even try to take your name in a courtroom. But dignity, the quiet, steady kind, stays with you as long as you choose to carry it. I was not a perfect father. I missed signals I should have caught earlier. If this grandpa stories moment has any use to you, let it be this: pay attention early. Trust the quiet signals. Document everything, not out of suspicion, but out of self-respect. Do not wait until someone has already opened the filing cabinet before you understand what they came for. My personal belief is simple. You cannot control what family members choose to become. You can only control who you choose to remain. And I believe, as a man relearning how to say this, that God has a way of delivering things to where they were always meant to go. This family story is one I never planned to tell. But if it helps even one person hold their boundaries a little firmer, then it was worth every word. If this Grandpa Stories account stayed with you in any way, leave a thought below, share it with someone who might need it, and consider joining this channel. There are more Grandpa Stories and more family story moments still to come. Thank you sincerely for staying until the end. And a final note. Some stories here contain fictional elements built for reflection and education. If that is not what you are looking for, please feel free to choose content that serves you better. Until next time.